2 years ago, I made the bold prediction that ESPN would cease to exist, at least in its current format, by 2030. Now, here we are 2 years later, and it's entirely possible that I could have been wrong. ESPN might cease to exist even sooner than that. Throughout my lifetime, ESPN has been viewed as the mecca of sports coverage. If you were an aspiring journalist, if you grew up dreaming of being in sports talk radio, ESPN was the dream. You didn't dream of working at Fox. You didn't dream of working alongside Slam and Sammy, incorrectly picking games on local radio in gay Arkansas. Your dream was to land a job at ESPN, which was known at the time as the worldwide leader in sports. But as longtime viewers of this channel already know, ESPN is no longer recognized as the worldwide leader in sports. Over the past 2 or 3 years, ESPN has proudly worn the crown of the worldwide leader in woke. Their dedication to the woke wiener, it has had a devastating impact on their business. Television ratings in the pooper. ESPN has been struggling financially. Over the last 5 years, ESPN has been forced to lay off thousands of its employees. It's gotten so bad that ESPN actually ran out of hard-working employees to lay off. Throughout this year, the network, they have been letting go of useless shitfucks who are collecting woke welfare. The woke fungus, it has infected ESPN so badly that it is no longer viewed as the dream job. The handful of qualified normal people working at ESPN, they no longer want to be there. Earlier this year, Charley Arnolt left ESPN to join Outkick. 5 or 10 years ago, that would be unfathomable. You're going to leave the pinnacle of sports media to go work for a website? You're going to leave the largest platform in sports media to go work for a website that only appeals to half the country? 5 or 10 years ago, that would not make sense, but today it makes perfect sense because ESPN is no longer the pinnacle of sports media. This weekend, we learned of another person who decided to leave ESPN voluntarily. Now, how many of you guys have heard of Dianna Russini? I'm a diehard fan of the NFL who covers the media every single day. I had never heard of Dianna Russini until the New York Post notified me of this story Friday afternoon. 20 years ago, Dianna Russini, she would have been a household name for people who consistently watch the NFL. Today, she's relatively unknown, which further proves ESPN's inability to create new stars. She has been working at the network since 2015. The majority of her tenure at ESPN's been dedicated to covering the NFL. She's one of their primary reporters. She is regularly featured on NFL Live, which is probably why most of us have never heard of her because most normal people are no longer watching ESPN. Me personally, I refuse to watch ESPN because their coverage of the NFL, the NBA, it is absolutely atrocious. Why do I need ESPN when I have the NFL Network? Why do I need ESPN when I have NBA TV? The need for ESPN in the marketplace, it's been diminished. Outside of live sports, there's no reason to watch ESPN, unless, of course, you identify as a shitfuck. ESPN provides plenty of wanker spanking material for those lonely men who can't attract a breathing woman, or, in some cases, a breathing man who is pretending to be a woman. Now, I am not too familiar with her work, but from what I have read about Dianna Russini, she seems to be well respected in the industry. Most people describe her as one of the better NFL reporters in the business. Unlike Mina Kimes, Dianna Russini has an appropriate job title. ESPN didn't disguise her as an NFL analyst. They didn't pretend like she was qualified to analyze the league. Dianna Russini, she had one job: report NFL news. Apparently, she did her job well, very good at what she does. Over the last few months, ESPN has released dozens of parishioners at Woke United Methodist. They even released their esteemed pastor, Father Jalen Rose. But throughout these ongoing layoffs, Dianna Russini was one of the very few people that ESPN wanted to keep. Well, what about Mark Jones? ESPN wants to keep him too. Who? Mark Jones! Mark Jones! I still can't figure out why they continued to give bi-weekly donations to Mark Jones. That dude is an absolute fraud, pretending like he relates to people living in urban areas while he's crying on the shoulder of his white wife in the suburbs sending his kids to private school. My inside sources tell me Mark Jones, he can't even drop off his kids at school. This private school, they hire the local police department for security. As you guys know, Mark Jones, terrified of the police. He's always afraid they'll mistake him for the Star Trek virgin Mike Freeman and return him to the Death Star. But anyway, throughout these ongoing layoffs, Dianna Russini, one of the few people that ESPN wanted to keep, her contract was up for renewal. Over the last few weeks, they have been negotiating terms for her new deal, which is incredibly ironic when you think about it. The worldwide leader in woke is supposedly the network that is dedicated to diversity, or lack of diversity, depending on how you look at it. But in these times of financial struggle, the two people ESPN wanted to maintain the most both happen to lack melanin: Pat McAfee, Dianna Russini. ESPN offered her a substantial raise. Everything seemed to be going well. Executives at ESPN thought the offer they presented was unbeatable. I mean, who would turn down a raise to work at the most hated sports media network? Apparently, Dianna Russini. At the last minute, she informed ESPN that she's going to be turning down their offer of woke welfare to go work at The Athletic. The Athletic? The same Athletic that is struggling to stay in business? The same Athletic that reported an $8 million loss in the second quarter of 2023? You're going to leave the gigantic dump at ESPN to go work at the miniature dump at The Athletic? I mean, if you're attracted to dumps, why not apply at the WNBA? The WNBA is the dump of all dumps. Now, on the surface, this decision, it doesn't make sense. This would be like Jesse Waters leaving his primetime slot at Fox News after they offered him a substantial raise to stay. This would be like Jesse Waters turning down Fox News to go work at News Nation, where he would be colleagues with Chris Cuomo. Hey, it's me, Chrissy C. You're going from the pinnacle in cable news to a place where media careers are literally on life support. Like I said, on the surface, doesn't make sense. ESPN's footprint is a hell of a lot larger than The Athletic, so why would Dianna Russini turn down a raise to go work for a smaller company? We can only speculate at this point. Dianna Russini, she's not provided her reasoning for leaving ESPN, but my guess, it's the same reason Charley Arnolt left earlier this year. It's the same thing Sage Still's been complaining about for 3 or 4 years now. Same reason that Cain left. If you're a normal person, ESPN is a toxic environment for you. You're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to give your opinion. Malika Andrews can pound her desk and complain about abortion rights. But if you want to present the counter argument, if you want to criticize abortion, your opinion is not allowed. Now, I think that's part of it, but I think another part of it, ESPN is no longer viewed as the pinnacle of sports media. Dianna Russini leaving puts a big hole in ESPN's NFL coverage. Now, in the past, this would have been no big deal. The rare cases where a star left the network, ESPN would just replace them with another star and no one would really care. Problem is, ESPN doesn't have a deep roster like they've had in the past. Listen to this lineup for ESPN's reporting of the NFL. They are replacing Dianna Russini with Lindsay Theory. KC, who the fuck is that? I have no idea. Never heard of her. With a name like Lindsay, I would assume she's a woman, but these days, Lindsay could be the man formerly known as Larry who chose to identify with a marginalized group just to get hired by ESPN. Now, ESPN, they are also expanding the role of Kimberly Martin. And yes, she's unknown too. The only time I have heard of Kimberly Martin is when she was filling in for Stephen A. Smith on Woke Take, taking his role as the lead general in the fight against mythical racism. I'm assuming one of her responsibilities in her expanded role will be to highlight the clear problem of mythical racism in the NFL. You know, because the NFL doesn't have enough black head coaches. Dianna Russini. Dianna Russini voluntarily leaving ESPN. It is an indictment on the current state of the network. They are in the middle of layoffs. People are struggling to keep their jobs, and ESPN has people leaving voluntarily. At this point, the worldwide leader in woke is getting desperate. I'm sure you guys saw this week where they made that gambling deal. That's going to be an absolute disaster. There was more news released this week about ESPN begging one of the major sports leagues to purchase ownership stake in the network. Now, of course, all four leagues have responded with a hard no, which mildly pleases executives at ESPN since they enjoy anything hard, but it does not solve their financial problems. Hard truth is, ESPN no longer serves a purpose. ESPN no longer fills a need in the marketplace. Outside of live sports, there's no reason to watch ESPN. And the problem is, I believe they are running into a situation where it's entirely possible they can no longer afford live sports. The NBA is doubling their fees for their upcoming broadcast rights deal. Right now, it's around $2.6 billion a year. Adam Silver, he wants closer to $6 billion. ESPN can't afford that. Why would you pay $6 billion for something that's drawing 1.5 million viewers during the regular season? Now, in the past, they could offset that cost with all the additional content that the NBA creates for them. Sports Center, debate shows like Woke Take, documentaries, exclusive access to their stars for interviews or specials. But that need in the market, that need has vanished. Why do I need ESPN for access to Draymond Green? He's got his own podcast. If I want to know what Draymond Green is thinking, which I don't, but if I did, I would just listen to his show. Ratings for debate shows like First Take, they've been in decline for years because they abandoned the formula that worked. And Skip Bayless, he is making the same mistake right now on Undisputedly Woke. ESPN went with a rotating panel to debate Stephen A. Smith instead of finding one person they could turn into a star to fill that role. The problem with this formula, people don't like change. Think about it. If I came on here tomorrow and included two people that you guys don't give a shit about, would you continue watching this channel? The vast majority of you would say no. This channel was built on the opinion of one, me. You don't come here to listen to the opinion of Neighborhood Nate. You don't give a shit about him. It's the same at ESPN. First Take, it worked when it was Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless. No one gives a shit about Ryan Clark. No one cares about Kendrick Perkins. Now, I think JJ Redick is good, but you can only use him during the NBA season. Sports Center has never been more irrelevant. Around the Horn, failure. ESPN Radio, failure. This network in general has never been more irrelevant. And the reason ESPN is irrelevant, the reason they are struggling, besides their dedication to Woke United Methodist, the reason they are struggling is because ESPN no longer feels a need in the market. And this has been going on for some time now. ESPN just simply fails to adjust. Now, it's not from a lack of effort. They keep trying new things, but they just don't know what to do at this point. But give me your thoughts. Dianna Russini voluntarily leaves ESPN to join The Athletic. 5 or 10 years ago, stuff like this just doesn't happen. Why do you think we continue to see people voluntarily leaving ESPN? Also, do you agree ESPN ceases to exist by 2030? Do you think it could happen sooner? I'm starting to wonder if Disney is contemplating selling the company altogether, selling the network altogether. Give me your thoughts. Sound off in the comments below. Like, subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.